Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what has to be one of the absolute most fascinating underdog sports narratives of the decade. We're talking about a nation of barely 3 million people that went from a complete global embarrassment to engineering one of the most deliberate, meticulously planned sporting comebacks in recent memory. That's right, we're diving into the Qatar national football team, famously known as Al-Anabi, or the Maroon Ones. We're going to break down the data, the tactics, and this undeniable redemption arc they've been building for the 2026 World Cup. But to really appreciate where they're headed, we first have to confront exactly where they started.
Okay, let's dive into this. 0, that is exactly how many wins and how many draws Qatar achieved during their highly controversial 2022 World Cup debut on home soil. Literally 0. Despite all those years of preparation, when the lights were at their absolute brightest, they came up completely empty. And the psychological weight of that 2022 performance was just genuinely crushing. I mean, they became the first host nation in the entire history of the World Cup to lose their opening match, completely stifled by Ecuador. Then, they were the first host knocked out after just 2 games following a harsh defeat to Senegal. And finally, the first host to lose all 3 of their group games when the Netherlands comfortably put them away. The absolute only sliver of a silver lining in that entire tournament was a single goal, Qatar's first ever at a World Cup, scored by Mohamed Mentari. It was a narrative of shame that honestly could have broken a footballing program forever. But listen, this isn't a story of defeat. I am so incredibly excited to show you what happened next because this 2026 team is vastly different from those overwhelmed, unprepared hosts we saw back in 2022. They didn't just sit around and wallow in that failure. Nope. They used it as pure fuel for a completely merit-based, systematically engineered comeback. Section 1. Engineering a football powerhouse, the blueprint.
So what's the secret? How exactly did a Gulf state, where the vast majority of residents are actually expatriate workers, transform into a continental footballing powerhouse? Well, the answer lies right here, the Aspire Academy. Founded back in 2004 in Doha, you have to understand this isn't just your typical local soccer school. It is a highly sophisticated, state-funded football engineering factory. They identify kids at super young ages, bringing them in and providing them with world-class coaching, nutrition, education, and sports science all the way into adulthood. It's literally central planning applied to sports at the absolute highest possible level. And this brilliantly illustrates the results of that long-term blueprint. Just look at this staggering consistency. 70% of the players that represented Qatar at the 2022 World Cup and 70% of the squad that won the 2019 Asian Cup were meticulously produced by this single unified academy. Think about that for a second. It proves that Qatar's rise isn't just a fluke, it's the direct product of a deeply rooted developmental ecosystem. Which brings us to another incredible number, 25. Out of the 26 players selected for the 2026 squad, 25 of them play their club football entirely domestically in the Qatar Stars League. There is literally only one exception, defender Homam Al-Amin, who plies his trade over in Spain. Now, while that hyper-domestic concentration might limit their exposure to the elite European leagues, it creates a massive advantage in team chemistry. So how did this blueprint translate back onto the pitch after 2022? Let's track the timeline. After that humiliation, they bounced back remarkably in January 2024 by actually defending their title as AFC Asian Cup champions, becoming the first team in the modern era to go back-to-back. Then, in May 2025, they made a massive statement of intent by hiring former Real Madrid and Spain manager Julen Lopetegui. And finally, the ultimate climax, October 2025. Facing elimination in the qualifiers, Bouam Kouki and Pedro Miguel scored to secure a dramatic 2-1 win over the UAE. For the very first time in their history, Qatar qualified for a World Cup purely on merit. Section 2, the mastermind and the arsenal.
Let's start with the mastermind himself. When Qatar hired Julen Lopetegui, he reportedly said, "Life owed me a World Cup." And you really have to understand the context here to see why this is just such a perfect match. Back in 2018, Lopetegui was brutally sacked as the manager of the Spanish national team just 2 days before the World Cup began, simply because he had accepted a future job with Real Madrid. His own personal, deep-seated desperation for World Cup redemption perfectly mirrors Qatar's exact same desperation as a nation. Honestly, it's pretty poetic. So the crucial point is how Lopetegui actually applies this motivation tactically. Deeply rooted in that famous Spanish coaching tradition, he completely demands short passing combinations, starting right from the goalkeeper.
He utilizes a highly organized medium to high defensive press, and he absolutely loves exploiting wide areas to create positional superiority. He's successfully taken this possession-heavy philosophy and adapted it to fit the Qatari squad's 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 shape, transforming them into a side that really tries to outmaneuver opponents rather than just trying to outrun them.
But of course, a tactical system is nothing without an executor on the pitch. And Qatar has a genuine superstar in 29-year-old Akram Afif. Guys, I cannot overstate how good this player is. He's a two-time AFC Player of the Year. He was the top scorer and best player at the 2023 Asian Cup. Operating primarily off the left wing, he combines this explosive, terrifying pace on the dribble with exceptional vision and just utterly lethal dead ball accuracy. Make no mistake, he is the undisputed world-class heartbeat of this national team.
Now, what's really interesting about this dynamic is how Afif's brilliance completely unlocks his partner in crime, Almoez Ali. Just check out these numbers. Afif bagged 8 goals in the Asian Cup, sure. But during World Cup qualifying, he provided 11 assists, literally the most of any player in the entire Asian Confederation. And who was finishing all those passes? Almoez Ali, who scored a massive 12 goals in qualifying. Ali is just your classic penalty box predator. This partnership, Afif creating magic from the wing and Ali finishing in the box, is the lethal engine that is driving Qatar forward. Surrounding that dynamic duo is a seriously battle-tested veteran core. You've got captain Hassan Al-Haidos boasting a jaw-dropping 188 international caps. In goal is Michal Barsham, arguably the best keeper in all of Asia right now. Defensively, you have the physically imposing center-back pairing of Boulam Kuki and Lucas Mendez holding the line, and they're protected by Karim Boudioff serving as the essential defensive midfield engine. And remember how we said 25 of these guys play in the same domestic league? That means this national team effectively operates with the kind of telepathic chemistry you usually only see in a club team. It's a huge asset that makes up for their lack of global club experience. But hey, we have to be completely impartial here. They are definitely far from invincible. Looking at the balance sheet, their strengths are undeniable, right? Back-to-back continental champions, Afifi's individual brilliance, and a massive set-piece threat. However, their weaknesses are glaring on the world stage. Lopetegui's high defensive line leaves them incredibly vulnerable to fast transition counterattacks. They have practically zero elite European League exposure to prepare them for the sheer physicality of top-tier teams. Plus, they still carry the historical mental baggage of that 2022 collapse. Section 3, the final test, Group B. Let's move to and see how this builds, because Qatar is facing a massive uphill battle here. Looking at the Group B table, Qatar is ranked 55th in the world. And who are they up against? Well, they're facing Switzerland, an elite European squad ranked 17th, and Canada, a fired-up tournament co-host ranked 27th. Both are heavily favored to advance. Bosnia, sitting at 71st, is the dark horse, but still presents a really tough physical UFA opponent. So on paper, Qatar are the undeniable underdogs in a very, very deep pool. Their campaign kicks off on June 13th in San Francisco against the clear group favorite Switzerland. And let's be real, this is about pure tactical survival. The Swiss feature elite players like Granit Xhaka and Manuel Akanji, and they utilize a absolutely suffocating pressing system. Qatar's double pivot midfield is going to be under immense pressure from the jump. Lopetegui's main goal here will be to just maintain a compact defensive block, absorb the Swiss possession, and basically pray they can spring Akram Afif on a lightning-fast counterattack. Then, 5 days later in Vancouver, they face the ultimate test of their transition defense against Canada. Not only will they be fighting a massive, totally deafening home crowd backing the co-hosts, but they also have to contain elite, pacey attackers like Jonathan David. Remember that vulnerability to fast transitions we talked about earlier? Yeah, if Qatar's high defensive line isn't perfectly coordinated here, Canada's speed could absolutely tear them apart. By the time they reach Seattle on June 24th to play Bosnia, the stakes will be crystal clear. Now, this is an incredibly physical matchup against a seasoned team led by the legendary Edin Dzeko, but realistically speaking, out of all 3 group games, this is Qatar's most viable chance to secure a historic point, or maybe, just maybe, steal their first ever World Cup victory. So what does the path forward actually look like? Well, the data paints a pretty stark picture. Their probability of finishing in the top 2 for direct qualification is quite low, only about 5 to 10%. The probability of crushing out in the group stage again is unfortunately high, sitting at 65 to 75%. But here's the wild card. The 2026 World Cup features expanded tournament rules. The best third-place teams will now actually advance to the round of 32. This gives Qatar a 15 to 25% chance of slipping through. Literally, even a single well-fought draw and a win against Bosnia could miraculously push them through. They are no longer the naive, unprepared hosts of 2022. They are battle-tested Asian champions, armed with a world-class winger, guided by a manager with a massive chip on his shoulder, and backed by a 2-decade-long blueprint for success. So the only question that remains is this. After the crushing humiliation of 2022, can Qatar's engineered powerhouse finally claim a victory on the ultimate world stage? We'll find out this summer. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.